Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of The Invisible Man, which hits theaters here in North America this Friday. This is the latest version of the classic H.G. Wells novel, and it is part of Universal's seemingly never-ending quest to update and revive the classic Universal Monsters characters. Now, this is not part of the Dark Universe. This is not like the Mummy reboot where they're trying to launch seemingly a series of franchise films. This is a very small, intimate movie, which is why it's also extremely scary. It stars Elizabeth Moss as a woman who escapes her emotionally, physically, psychologically abusive boyfriend and finds out just a few weeks later that he is apparently dead, only to seemingly be haunted by himself, but now he's invisible. Yes, this is a very simple setup, but it's also a very effective setup. And I think what the smart thing that Universal did with this version was to give it to a production company like Blumhouse, who knows how to do great things with very little, and especially to writer-director Leigh Whannell, who in addition to this movie and also with Upgrade, should be at the top of the list for any, particularly a studio that's looking for a thriller/horror director. Leigh Whannell is really coming on strong these last couple of years because this movie is, number one, scary, but it's not what I would categorize as a traditional horror film. Yes, there are horror elements, but it is also much more so a psychological thriller. This is about some kind of an entity, be it a person. We certainly think that we know who it is, and there's not much mystery to it in that sense. However, it's really about the mystery unfolding to the rest of the world. It taps into so many primal fears, the fear of the unknown, the fear of something following you and stalking you that you can't see, the fear of not being believed, of being accused of things you didn't do, of being set up and framed and made to look bad to the people that love you most, of alienating you from the people that you trust the most and whose help you need. It is such a primal fear of all of these things that the movie is able to tap into really, really effectively. And the other thing that I like about this is it's not so mixed up with the concept of an invisible man. We don't spend a lot of time showing machinations in a lab, showing things being invented or created, or the villain coming up with a master plan. It is much more about the terror of an invisible man and what it does to the psyche of the person that he chooses to terrorize. Now, it's no big news flash that Elizabeth Moss is a great actress. She has been from the time that I remember seeing her almost 2 decades ago on The West Wing, through The Handmaid's Tale, through several other films and TV shows. But this performance in particular, the entire movie is really on her shoulders. Because as you can imagine, in a movie called The Invisible Man, as an actor, you have to sell a menace that by its very nature, by definition, is invisible. Now, in the hands of a less capable actor or group of actors, this could have looked ridiculous. This really could have looked bad. It could have almost been laughable if you don't have actors that are capable of putting the audience in their shoes and making you as an audience member, first and foremost, take this situation seriously. And there's not 1 second when Elizabeth Moss is in a room facing off against a supposedly dead ex-boyfriend who may or may not even be there. There's not a moment where you think that it is an actor alone on an empty set. Leigh Whannell, Elizabeth Moss, and the rest of the cast, which includes Aldous Hodge, Oliver Jackson Cohen as Adrian, the thought-to-be dead boyfriend who seems to be menacing Elizabeth Moss from beyond the grave. Every single actor sells the concept, sells the fear, sells the premise of the movie, and I think that's what makes this work so well. And we talked a lot about what films can do, and I think one of the most effective things that a film, particularly one that is a psychological thriller/horror film like this one is, one of the most effective things it can do is to put you in the shoes of the character on screen. And when I say that this is a smaller film and an intimate film, and why this was the best approach for this movie, you are in the shoes of the main character, which means that you also feel like you're being stalked. As Elizabeth Moss is walking around the house or walking around wherever she is, worried and not knowing where this menace may pop up next, as a viewer, you share those feelings. And that is so effective and primal. And on a filmmaking level, easy to do in the sense that you don't need a huge effects budget. You don't need a big monster. All you need is the ability to create atmosphere and sustain tension. Leigh Whannell does it. His actors do it, led by Elizabeth Moss, and it is incredibly effective throughout the film. It's actually kind of amazing that this movie was able to do, on a reported budget of $9 million, what Tom Cruise and a $200 million budget from the same studio were unable to do, which is to make one of these classic Universal monsters effective, scary, and relevant. Because yes, this is also a movie that does speak to issues like domestic abuse, that does speak to issues like gaslighting, that does speak to issues about who you believe and why you believe them. But it doesn't do it in a way that seems preachy. It doesn't do it in a way that overwhelms the movie's really main goal, which is to entertain you, to scare you, to get you on the edge of your seat. It is able to balance that with a very real and visceral message about abuse, about the psychological impacts of that, about what that can do to the people around you who support you, but also maybe question whether it has affected you in a way that could destabilize you, and how dangerous that mindset can be when you have to be believed, when you're in a situation where you must be believed that there is someone after you. It brings up all of these issues in a way that you can relate to as a viewer, but that also doesn't overwhelm the palpable tension and terror of the movie itself. So I think The Invisible Man set out to do a lot of things. I think it accomplishes all of them. It is a scary movie. It is an effective movie. I will say that I think that if you have been the victim of domestic abuse or violence, it could perhaps be triggering for you, because, as I mentioned, it is a very visceral experience. And if you've gone through the same things that Elizabeth Moss goes through in this movie, I think it definitely has a potential to bring back some of those feelings. So I would have a word of caution on that front. But I also think that it is a great feat of filmmaking, a great feat of acting, even down to the score from Benjamin Wallfish, who's done the music for Blade Runner 2049, did music for It, did the music for Shazam, has worked with Hans Zimmer on a number of occasions on film scores as well. The music in this film is great. It's a great mix of the classic sort of Universal monster feel, but also a very intense and modern thriller / horror score. So I think the Invisible Man is an unqualified success. I really enjoyed the movie. If you're a fan of thrillers, if you're a fan of horror, I think you're gonna like the movie. It had me on the edge of my seat for the entire 2 hours that it runs. And a lot of times, if you have a movie like this that runs around 2 hours, sometimes it can wear out its welcome. It did not do that for me. It is much more akin to the classic psychological thrillers than it is to the sort of forgettable horror film that I think it could have been. It's more Fatal Attraction than Hollow Man, and I know a lot of people will probably like Hollow Man, but I think this is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the superior Invisible Man movie. Invisible Man, as I mentioned, opens domestically this weekend. It has a big recommendation for me. I very much would suggest that you go see it. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think you will too. That's my review for The Invisible Man. Did you see the movie? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and stay tuned here on Fandom Entertainment. We have Screen Junkies Universe every day. We have some great pieces about the Joker and Harley Quinn in real life, and later this week I will also be reviewing Pixar's latest, Onward, which opens domestically next week. Until then, thanks for watching.